Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and this is Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. I'm Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Let's get started here and change things up a little. Sunsets, Blu-ray, DVD, available locally, but you can get it on Amazon Prime as a download. You can rent or buy it. Check it out. If you can't find it at first, because there's a lot of stuff called Sunsets, put my name or Trevor's name in. You'll get it. You'll hit it pretty quick. We should be able to make everything available soon for the physical copies of the DVD Blu-rays through our website at www.legendssuperstitionmountains.com. Additionally, you can check out other swag and merchandise over there. Please subscribe to our channel here and hit the notification bell and leave a comment if you want to leave a comment. Got all that out of the way. This story is set in Colorado. I was going through Oscar Branson's files, and I was looking at different files and looking. I like sometimes to find the name of something that sounds cool. And I saw this folder and it said, the Crazy Swede Mine. And the first thing I do is I Google it to see is there a lot of stuff about the Crazy Swede Mine. And I didn't really find anything. Found a couple mentions of it, but nothing in detail. The individual, and I'm going to use a few notes here today because there's a bunch of names. And it's a rather kind of lengthy story. The manuscript I have, the original typed manuscript I have, is 18 pages, so I'm sure it was either from a book or a magazine article. The individual, Temple Houston Cornelius, born in 1891, died in 1964. His last book was in 1964, Sheepherder's Gold. It's still available out there. I think it's an ebook, and it'll have this story in it in detail. Cornelius was the author of this. Obviously, Branson got a bunch of his files and stuff. And Cornelius, again, was the writer of this. This takes place in between Salt Lake City and Ouray, Colorado, in Bear Canyon. And the individual here, who's known as the Crazy Swede, is a guy named Gus Lindstrom. Now, Gus Lindstrom was an immigrant. He'd come to the United States. He'd worked in mining most of his life. He worked at the Camp Bird Mine, which is a very famous, well-known mine up in Colorado, which was found by a man named Tom Walsh. He worked there with a number of other people and so forth, but he worked at a number of different mines through Colorado. Very knowledgeable mining man and understanding geology and a lot of that. The Swede was pretty well learned. They said he had a bit of an accent, but he spoke very good English, was very intelligent, but a very large and capable man. So Lindstrom's going up into the mountains, and he's going up through this Bear Canyon area and Bear Creek Canyon. And on the way, he stops at a friend's place. The gentleman's name was Tim Colby. He has a cabin, and they're there, and bad weather's coming in. He was leaving Salt Lake City, heading for Ouray, Colorado. The Swede was. Colby's going to run to another place. He said, why don't we stay up the night, see how the weather looks in the morning, and we'll both get started on our way. So they have a breakfast. They travel down a bit of a way together, but then they have to separate and take separate paths. So Lindstrom's traveling through the canyon, and as he goes through, the weather comes in and comes down into the canyon, and it starts to snow, and it starts to snow hard. And he realizes after a period of time he's going to have to take cover. So he starts looking in the canyon. He's managed in the snowstorm to get off trail. So he's kind of bushwhacking, just trying to make his way along the ridge, below the ridge line. And he sees an alcove that's not very deep. It's not a cave, but it's a shallow alcove, but it'll get him out of the weather. So he decides to take shelter there, at least till the storm passes and he can try to find his way back out. So he goes and takes shelter in this place and settles down as the storm just rages around him. But he knows he's pretty comfortable. He hopes the storm doesn't last more than through the night because he doesn't have a lot of supplies. It appears he just took a couple sandwiches, some boots, a spare shirt, and some stuff. He traveled very light. He had his rock pick, but very, very light. Didn't have much with him. So he's kind of holed up and he's sitting there and he starts just looking around after a while with what available light he has, or he has a little fire. And he sees there's this nub, he calls it, kind of the back of this cleft and alcove. And he looks at it and it looks odd because it's a different colored rock than everything around. It's very dark. So he goes over and starts kind of checking it out and thinking, that's weird. It's like a intrusion right in here. And he decides to get his rock pick out and whack at it a few times and break something off to get a better look at it. He does so, and as he's looking at it, he realizes it's calverite, which is a very rare mineral, but it's well known up in that area. Now, great story about calverite is around 1893, prior to that time. In Australia, they found a bunch of calverite, but they thought it was like pyrite, fool's gold. They didn't know what was contained in it, that it would carry a lot of gold, free gold with it. So they were using it to fill potholes and other things, and then they discovered that it had quite a bit of gold. And when that was finally discovered, they started digging it all up, and it caused, I think in 1896, one of the gold rushes in Australia from that find. Well, this is similar to that area in Ouray, between Salt Lake City and Ouray, in those mountains. A lot of the gold up in there is in calverite. So he realizes what he has. He's looking at it. He starts breaking more pieces off and going through and breaking them down, getting as much of the gold as he can. He ends up breaking off pieces like small pieces you can hold in your hand, and maybe $50 silver dollar size, but up to pieces that weigh 7 to 10 pounds. And he puts all this good stuff aside. And as the weather's clearing, he realizes he has about 60, 70 pounds of this stuff he's broke off. He puts it in his pack and decides the weather's cleared enough, he's going to make his way out of there and into Ouray, and he needs to find that trail again. So he breaks off out of there and starts heading through the canyon, and he knows there's a trail road back in there, but he has to make his way to it. Now, once he leaves, because he's in a hurry, he wants to find that trail road before the weather sets back in, because it looks stormy again, he just starts kind of zip-zagging and round and everything, and he finally hits the trail road as the snow starts coming down really heavy again. He finally makes it into Ouray, and he gets a room, puts all his belongings in there, goes down to the saloon just to get a nice hot meal. Feeling fortunate he got out of the mountains. He managed to, he's a big man, he's a strong man, so he did that. But it's important to note he was, they said, a very, very skilled miner, but he was not an outdoorsman guy that made his way through the mountains. There are two different kinds of people. There are many, many people that are really excellent prospectors, very knowledgeable about geology and a number of things, and mining, and have experience in that. There's also people that are great in the wilderness, up in the mountains and stuff, the more mountain men type individuals. And these are, most of the time, are very separate types of individuals. The former, the prospector and so forth, can be someone that, there's an old saying, a stranger in a strange land only sees half the country. And that's probably what happened in this case. So he gets there, though. He's eating his meal, and an individual he knows, a gentleman by the name, and I'm looking for it here, but his name was J.T. Boyd. J.T. Boyd had been a superintendent at the Camp Bird mine, and they'd worked together a couple different places. So he knew Boyd really well. They're sitting down eating, and he asked the Swede, and Swede told him he'd come out of Bear Canyon and all this. But as they're talking, he tells Boyd, I got something to show you. You won't believe what I found. Because he trusts Boyd. It's someone he's known quite some time and feels he can trust. So he takes Boyd back to his room and shows him the ore. Boyd is amazed. He says, yeah, it's in calverite. It's just full of gold. He's like, he was amazed at how much gold was in this stuff and was pretty happy for the Swede. And he said he was a good man. And he said he felt really good for him. And the Swede kind of explained everything, how he had come upon it and so forth, and the cleft and the ledge of the rock and how everything was set up, and said he was pretty sure he could find the place again. He was going to go back, but he wanted to dispose of this ore first, put his money in the bank. So Boyd actually helps him to do this, goes down and is there when he gets it assayed. It's assayed at $200,000 per ton. But what's more important, he turns it all in. It's about 70 pounds of ore, and that 70 pounds nets him $7,300, which is close, around $250,000 today. So the Swede should have probably, and the idea of what befalls most prospectors, quit while he was ahead. But the Swede felt he could claim it because he wanted to be famous, like the Camp Bird mine, which was worth millions of dollars. He said, this is just what was on the surface. Now, Boyd said, it's important to note this, that there was moss on these pieces. So he said, yes, the stuff he had was surface ore, and it had moss on a bunch of the pieces. So he was very interested in it, realized, man, imagine how rich it's probably going down in this vein. So they talk, and Swede says, well, he says, I've told you enough. I'll go look for it. And he says, I'll let you know how things go once I locate it, put my location markers up and so forth, and bring some more in. If I need some help, I'll let you know. And that's kind of the end of that for some time. Boyd doesn't really enter the picture for a while there. The Swede goes back up in the mountains and finds, once the snow's melted off, he doesn't have any idea where he's at. Nothing seems familiar. He didn't take anything. He didn't recognize a tree, a ledge, a spire, a pinnacle, anything. He had no landmark to go on. He just traveled what he thought it was about the distance, didn't even know if he was in the right direction, and suddenly realized, I'm doing the reverse, so now I got to do it this way. So then the Swede tried starting from Lake City and then coming in. He did this for the next 5-6 years, and he drove himself insane looking for this place. He literally had created a needle in the haystack where there was nothing really to go on. Then he knew it was in this canyon, and he knew it was in this alcove, and every alcove looked like every other alcove. So he'd go back sometimes in the winter, he'd go back when it snowed, he'd go back every time to try to replicate what he'd done. But because he'd been lost off the trail and the road, he wasn't quite sure where he deviated and wasn't quite sure how he got back on. So finally, 1908, he's committed to the Pueblo State Hospital, considered insane, and he dies in 1909. At this time, J.T. Boyd, now he did tell Colby and a friend of Colby's, and his name I think was Rockaway, he told them about the mine while stopping at their cabin once. They had no idea. They thought he was nuts, and the story kind of got around a little about the mine, that it was the crazy Swede mine, but they were unaware that he'd really found this stuff. Colby later says, yeah, everybody would talk about it, how crazy the Swede was. He was such a good guy, but he kind of drove himself insane looking for this imaginary mine. And Colby said, no, I saw the ore. It was very real. Everything about it was very real. So they never really pay that much attention to it, and in fact, never look for it. But the Swede's committed, and at that point, J.T. Boyd decides he knows probably more than anyone. He's kept it to himself, and he realizes with what's happened to the Swede, Gus Lindstrom, he's going to go now and look for it. And so Boyd goes out and begins a 40-year quest to look for it. He does everything the Swede did and then some. He goes out whenever he has a chance. He makes a trip. He goes through the area, spends weeks sometimes in areas looking over every possible thing. He does find float down in the canyon in the creeks that has some calverite. So he realizes there is some of this calverite, but it's worn. So it's been worked its way down and kind of got worn rounded edges. So he realizes it's worked its way down, so it's not from the original place. So he keeps trying to work those areas. He finally realizes he's obsessing so much about this mine that he is literally starting to drive himself crazy like the Swede. So he starts backing off, making a yearly trip for the rest of his life. A part of that is he does aerial photography in the area and circling spots that could fit or match anything. He tries to figure possible deviation routes. Finally, Boyd dies. Boyd shares the story with very few people, including the author, though. But what's interesting is a gentleman by the name of Phil Dunbar. Now, in 1917, Phil Dunbar goes through, and he works construction. He's working down in the watershed down in Bear Creek, and he's a carpenter, and he's doing construction. Well, he's working 5-6 days a week. On his days off, though, he goes for hikes up in the canyons, and just goes to explore, just get out and get away. He's single, has nobody with him. He doesn't really drink or do anything else, so he just likes to go for a hike. And on one of these hikes, he's down in this one area, and he gets up on this ridge, and he finds this piece of rock, and it's kind of darkish color, and he picks it up, and it's very interesting. It's about the size of a $50, and it's kind of thick. It's about a 1/2 inch thick, and it's pretty sharp on the edges and all. And he picks it up and looks at it, and he just kind of thinks, this is the neatest thing. I've never seen anything quite like this. It's kind of like, this is interesting looking rock. I've never seen any. And he looks around, doesn't see anything like it anywhere in the area. So he just decides to put it in his pocket, and he carries on. Well, many years later, Phil Dunbar meets Temple H. Houston Cornelius. And as they're talking and stuff, Cornelius doesn't know much about the Swede mine, but he's kind of heard of it. But Dunbar, while they're talking, says, hey, you know, when I worked up in that area, I did find some really cool rocks. And he's showing him, and he brings out this one piece and sets it down. And Cornelius realizes he has a piece of calverite there that fits the exact description. It looks like it was broke off with a pickaxe. It's a small chunk, something that splintered off or could have fallen. And he looks at it, and it has some traces, a little bit of gold in it. And he tells him, you probably were right on that spot. And Dunbar explains that I was not a geologist, I was not a prospector, I never looked for anything like that. And he said if I would have brought it up or asked people what it was, they would have probably ridiculed me because I didn't know what it was, and I didn't want to feel dumb, so they always kind of bullied me about when I was like, hey, check out this rock. Well, that's worthless, you know. And you get that a lot from people. People say, oh, that's a worthless piece of crap. So rather than deal with anybody saying anything about his worthless piece of crap, he just kept it to himself, that it was a really nice-looking rock. He seemed a little interested, but not very interested, because he told Cornelius, I don't think I could ever find that spot again. He says, I don't know exactly where I was. I hiked all over there in those creeks and those mountains. And he said, I can't tell you what that particular day, where I was, what I was doing. I wasn't making note. I just thought it was a really nice looking rock and put it in my pocket. So, according to Cornelius, he felt that Dunbar had actually found a piece that the Swede had chipped off. It had all the markings of it. It wasn't rounded. It wasn't worn. It hadn't weathered much. So he figured it was either a piece that fell out of the pack or someplace very close by where it chipped off or broken while Swede was gathering things together. Dunbar, unfortunately, Cornelius lost track of Dunbar, but he says it didn't really matter because Dunbar really didn't have any interest in it because he said he wouldn't even know where to start. But then Cornelius started making some trips. He made some trips in the mountains, but he said again, the area is so rugged and the so little information is, he realized, what are you looking for? You're looking for a very shallow alcove in a cleft somewhere up on the cliff line that has a little nub of rock back in it. He said, again, you're just going to keep looking and looking, but you're hoping for broken pieces, but is there anything really broken off here? You near even if you find some float in the area. So that's the story of the crazy Swede mine, up between Salt Lake City and Ouray and in Bear Canyon and Bear Creek Canyon. And if you are up in that area, keep a look around because you never know. It was off the beaten path, we know that much, and he took shelter in the snowstorm. But the Swede, Lindstrom, neither did Boyd, Dunbar didn't know what he had, and Cornelius never found it. I kind of checked and started looking up a lot of the names, found the names fit. Cornelius's last book was in 1964, which contained this story. Cornelius, most of his stories seem to be from somewhat of a reliable source. He interviewed the individuals at hand and got the information. And like I said, the article or chapter that I got was typed out manuscript, and I looked at it and thought, man, he was pretty detailed. I mean, if you read the whole thing, like I said, it's 18 pages. It doesn't give you much detail on what to go on. It's more of speculation of, yeah, how many possibilities are there? So it tells you when you find something, the first thing you should do is if you think you found something important, look for landmarks. Look for something. Do something that would cause you to say, hey, I'm in the right area. You got a spare blue or red shirt? Just tie it to a branch somewhere nearby. Chances are it will survive, and it'll be a marker to tell you you're in the right area. Swede had none of that. He had no idea, no recognition of the area. and was never able to locate it again. So there's this week's story. I hope you enjoyed it. I really did. This was one of those ones that I just couldn't find much material other than this one book article and a brief magazine article on it from 1979. I found mentions of the crazy Swede or Lost Swede mine in Colorado in that area, but I didn't find any other detailed information. But I was able to follow up, which I always like to do, that these people did exist and they were in the area and they spent time searching for this mine. So an interesting story for Chasing Legends this time for all you people in Colorado, or if next summer you're taking a trip, or perhaps this winter when the snowstorm blows in, you want to get lost up there. I don't recommend it, but taking it and doing that. So there it is. Please pick up a copy of Sunsets, or just watch it. That's probably the easiest way, on your phone, on your laptop, on your pad, on anything. You can do it on your most televisions anymore through YouTube. Watch Sunsets. It's definitely worthwhile watching the film. Thank you to all the people, the hundreds of people that have downloaded and watched and viewed this film. We really do appreciate it. It's done very well. Trevor's very happy with the reception. We've got nothing negative feedback on it whatsoever. So it's a good, proud moment for us. So again, thank you for everything everybody's been for the Sunsets. I hope everyone's going to have a wonderful Thanksgiving this week, spending time with friends and family or whoever you're going to. Until the next time, and live, because we will catch live again this Friday, and catch up with everybody, how everything's going in the latest news and whatnot, what we're doing, unless other circumstances determine that we have to do something else. But until then, everybody have a great rest of the week. And always remember, most important thing, and you know what it is, you can say it with me. I'm Wayne Tuttle, you're not, and this was Chasing Legends.